So thanks for joining us for this exciting event and the launch of our report on lessons in learning and foresight use for international organizations. We will be recording this session and sharing on our YouTube channel, IDRC's YouTube channel. If you are, just a note on interpretation, if you're joining on Microsoft Teams, you should see the Kudo app at the top of your screens. And if you click on that, you can get options for interpretation. For those of you joining on, pour ceux qui se joignent via Microsoft Teams, vous devrez voir l'application Kudo en haut de votre écran. En cliquant dessus, vous aurez accès aux options d'interprétation. It's great to see everyone, and it'll be interesting to see where we've got representatives from. If there's any government departments, I assume there's some civil society, academia for sure, different international organizations, as well as some of our colleagues from IDRC. So as Fraser said, my name is Kaia Ambrose, and I am the Acting Director of Policy and Evaluation at Canada's International Development Research Centre, or IDRC. Before beginning this session, I would like to acknowledge that IDRC's headquarters is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation, who have lived on this territory for millennia. And I invite all of us to reflect on this and the deep tradition of knowledge that underpins the history of Canada's First Peoples and enriches our own quest for knowledge in Canada and internationally. Avant de donner la parole à Fraser et Donna pour lancer officiellement la séance, je voudrais donner un bref contexte pour ce rapport. Comme beaucoup d'entre vous le savent, il y a 3 ans, le CRDI a organisé son premier atelier interne sur la prospective stratégique, après avoir établi un cadre pour orienter notre approche de l'utilisation en la prospective. And Fraser is going to share a few links in the chat on our Foresight page. Depuis lors, nous avons investi dans diverses initiatives de prospective stratégique, tout en essayant de rester fermement concrétés sur l'utilisation et l'utilité et en tirant parti des apprentissages et de l'expérience des autres. This report was a more formal opportunity to bolster our own internal learning, drawing on experience, insights, and learning of different organizations similar to ourselves, with a view of drawing on and fast-tracking some of this as we build our own foresight journey internally. It is, of course, it has its own internal merit for IDRC, but we are hoping that many of you working in different kinds of organizations and with different issues and areas of focus will also find it useful. And we hope that this discussion is an opportunity to dig a little bit more into the report and hear from you and have an open discussion. We're really looking forward to that, to this part of the session today. Any questions, any comments, any perspectives will be very welcome. On that note, I would like to hand over to Fraser Riley-King, who is a senior analyst in the Policy and Evaluation Division. Fraser will moderate today's session, and Donna Dupont, founder and chief strategist with Purple Compass and the author of this report. So thank you. Thank you to both Fraser and Donna, and over to you.
So thank you so much for participating in the Mentimeter exercise. It was very helpful for us to get this type of feedback as we're moving through this project. So thank you very much. Okay, so now on to my presentation based on the Lessons in Learning report in Foresight Use for International Organizations for IDRC. This presentation will be a short overview of the report. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to download the report because there's a lot more detail that it will be hard to cover all of it in the span of 20 minutes. But if there is a piece that you're very intrigued and want to learn more, there's definitely a lot more detail within the report. So I will encourage you to take a look. And I've referenced certain slides of where you can find more information in the report. Next slide. So I love this quote. It's so powerful. It appears in the IDRC report. It's the choices we make today could lead to either a further breakdown or a breakthrough to a greener, better, and safer future. So this quote is very powerful because it really talks about our choices today and the choice between how we want to shape the future and whether we are going to be stuck in status quo thinking, or whether we're going to be open to new ideas, new perspectives that can be a breakthrough towards shaping a better future. So this really gets to the heart of our own personal choice and that we do have agency to shape the future. Next slide. So as we know, today's global system is rapidly changing and the landscape is becoming more volatile, more uncertain, with lots of complexity. And those complex spaces have many, many challenges that are interconnected and interdependent and are making it very, very difficult for a lot of our systems to be able to cope with the way they're structured based on, the past of how we've organized our institutions. We're also recognizing that there's a lot of limitations in the reactive and short-term planning approaches, and that we do need different ways of making sense of this complexity and uncertainty. And that Foresight is a catalyst for helping us to utilize it in different ways for adaptive capacity and for envisioning transformative futures. And so in this report, we do recognize that across a lot of international development organizations that strategic foresight is very important and essential for international development cooperation to ensure it's future ready for today and for future generations. Next slide. So this brings us to our research. This research is really based on one of the implementation debates that's been happening broadly about how do you integrate foresight into global development work. And this has been the foundation for the question that we're answering within this report. And so this was our approach to how we conducted this particular study. Within this study, we interviewed 11 participants, interviewees, that had extensive research in foresight, in implementing it within global international organizations. And we wanted to understand from their experience. So this is a primary type of research based on experiential learning. And this knowledge, we used a methodology that was able to code based on grounded theory methodology to code the information and being able to wrap up that information into knowledge theories. And it's the knowledge theories that we are presenting within this report. Next slide. So one of our first questions that we asked all interviewees was, why foresight? Why is it being used? And there was a lot of discussion in each of the interviews. So this is just a snapshot across the three perspectives that we wanted to understand. And what I've highlighted here in this slide is just what makes each perspective a little bit unique. So when we asked funding organizations this question, they were very interested in foresight to help them with long-term understanding of the system evolution, and that this was very helpful for them so that they could prioritize investments for change and for innovation. So they needed that long-term picture, and they needed to make good decisions, and they need to understand how things were changing over time. When we spoke to government and international bodies, they were very interested in understanding the landscape as well, but also wanted to apply it to ensure that we had future-ready policies and strategies that were more holistic in its approach. And then when we spoke to those from academia, there was a perspective of the need to cultivate more anticipatory mindsets and for shaping governance, and that this was very important for future leadership and for interdisciplinary collaboration. So these are just some of the highlights that made each one of these perspectives unique on its own. Next slide. So when we look across all the interviews, we extracted the following 6 value that Foresight provides to organizations within this project. The first was it generates dialogue across disciplines, and it helps to address these solutions for complex issues. So it allows for that broader engagement. The unlocking collaboration across sectors, again, very much linked to the first one. Very, very powerful use and value of Foresight. The third was enabling change by exploring plausible futures, so thinking what could be emerging and what if scenarios or different potentialities moving forward. Supporting decision making by surfacing some of our assumptions or blind spots. Fostering resilience by identifying risks, but also new opportunities. And then the last, to create hopeful narratives by fostering agency and collective ownership of the future. So these are just a handful of some of the values that were extracted from this research. Next slide. So when we looked at how organizations were putting Foresight into practice, there were lots of different elements that we captured across all of the interviews and use cases. However, there were 2 really important structural elements that stood out. The first was at the center was people and culture. And this was really important because it was all about being intentional about the culture and the community that you're building, and to ensure that you're capturing different perspectives and elevating thinking to a strategic level. So there's a recognition that this is a different mindset from the traditional ways of thinking, and it's an active way of learning, uncovering assumptions and making them explicit in the process. So this is a very much internal element within the organization. And then the second layer on top had to do more with knowledge and decision making. And it really speaks to the importance of being able to share work for sense making and to generate insights collectively within the organization, but also outside the organization with stakeholders and partners. And it's about tapping into a variety of different perspectives and understanding, analyzing, from analyzing different patterns, different signals of change, and also understanding how others may perceive those and what those implications could be and future considerations. So it's taking a very much a systemic look, not just within your organization, but also outside your organization as well. Next slide. So in order to do this well, this requires humility for reinvention, because it is very challenging to think outside one's comfort zone. You're moving from what is familiar to the unfamiliar, and that could be very uncomfortable for a lot of people who are used to things operating a certain way. And so this came through as an important thing to recognize when you are leading Foresight initiatives within an organization, especially those that are more mature and have perhaps more of more legacy structures within. It's just something to keep in mind. Next slide. So within this project, we also want to capture overall lessons learned from all of the interviewees. And we uncovered 22 lessons learned, and they fit nicely into 5 categories that we consider these as building blocks for success. And in the IDRC report, these are expanded on. There's a lot more detail than what's here on the slide, so I would encourage you to take a look at it. But the first one has to deal with leadership, and having a champion is quite essential in order to build a Foresight culture and drive change within the organization. The second is collaboration, and it's about being inclusive and having dialogue across diverse voices, and really thinking of it from a systemic point of view. The third is organizational transformation. So it's looking at how can we embed futures literacy at all levels within the organization and create more of a shared anticipatory mindset towards the future. The fourth is about processes. So it's taking a look at the context of which you want to apply Foresight. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to learn? And you want to tailor your methods towards that. And you may want to even consider co-designing your learning journeys of Foresight within the organization. And the fifth is outcomes. It's very important to evaluate and communicate the impact of your Foresight within the organization. Demonstrating this is quite important to build that internal business case, and of course to build momentum on the things that are working well and to continuously improve as you develop your competence and your confidence with applying Foresight in your organization. Next slide. The lessons learned also highlighted some challenges and opportunities, and these are just the ones that came up most often. The first was just overall organizational resistance to change. Can be very challenging to make changes, especially when things have been done a certain way for a long time. Resources, having limited resources or time were significant constraints to a lot of projects. And then also looking at, from a cognitive point of view, the short-term thinking and focus. This is very much a challenge for a lot of Foresight projects. And it really makes it challenging to be able to do Foresight when you're constantly thinking short-term or putting out a lot of the urgent fires on a day-to-day basis. Some of the opportunities really, that we've mentioned in some of the slides, but build on it a bit here, are really looking at how do you encourage and have diverse participation, and even looking at it from an ecosystem lens. How can you work much more broadly on a system level? Considering also decolonial perspectives and what are some of those legacy structures and patterns that are no longer, that need to be talked about and discussed and may need to evolve moving forward, and bringing those perspectives into the table as well. Making sure that we are engaging in underrepresented voices, really awareness to who's involved and in the room and who's not there, and making an effort to bring those that need to be part of the conversation. And then the last is scaling up futures literacy and co-creation practices so that people can collaborate and work together and have more exposure of these types of processes and methods. Next slide. So we also asked our interviewees if there were no constraints and you could, have your wish with how you implemented Foresight, what would you do? And across all of the interviews, we captured these 4 big themes that came out that we're calling our blue sky vision and Foresight wish list. And so these are things like leadership and organizational change. And it's really about making sure you have champions leading the transformative efforts, and that you have, a program in place to help build futures literacy. The second is around building a Foresight ecosystem. And so this is about having inclusive networks across sectors, opportunities for informal learning, and practice platforms. The third is deep integration into development organization. And this is really getting at opportunities for an evergreen foresight process aligned with your policy and planning cycles. And again, having dedicated foresight teams that are working closely with senior leadership. And then the fourth one is about inclusive futures literacy learning model. And this is about having scalable and democratized learning approaches that are accessible to all, including those in the Global South, and creating brave and creative spaces for dialogue and collaboration. Next slide. So these are our 7 use cases that we've captured in the report. And I would encourage you, they're in the appendix of the report, so I would encourage you to take a look at them. Each one is very unique. They represent different perspectives within an organization, from the programmatic or policy level to the strategic level to the leadership level, and different sizes of engagement, from small team engagement to ecosystem engagement. So they're each quite unique, and I would encourage you to take a look. I've certainly learned a lot from just capturing these use cases. Next slide. And if we look at these use cases from an organizational paradigm perspective, we'll see that starting at the bottom, what you're having is the foundations of futures literacy. Then building on that is the research and evidence base that helps inform policy and strategy, to exploring those areas of uncertainty, underfunded areas and opportunities and new roles going into the future, to strategic alignment within the organization to influence change, help inform strategy, to the higher, longer-term vision, and strategic level conversations that help build consensus within and across organizations. Next slide. So our report, in summary, really sees the practice and integration of futures and foresight thinking as something that provides a lot of value for international development organizations, helping to shape medium and long-term thinking in policy, strategy, and governance. It also helps to anticipate emerging needs and challenges, to explore change and uncertainty. But most importantly, it's really about collective approaches, and it's an openness to imagination beyond the conventional thinking to unlock new narratives, ideas, and opportunities to support agency for change. Next slide. So these are just a couple of ways that you can take action based on what we've learned in this report. Some suggestions are to start small, build your foresight capacity incrementally through training, pilots, partnerships. You might want to engage with other teams in simple foresight tools and practices. The second would be to leverage the resources that are available to you. This could be existing foresight networks, tools, case studies, use cases like in our report for inspiration, and to foster collaboration across sectors, see how you can amplify each other's knowledge and help with any kind of resource burdens. And the last is to scale gradually and embed foresight into existing processes where you can, and then starting to develop your own programs, your own processes, and perhaps have your champions within your organizations to help sustain those efforts. Next slide. So engaging in strategic foresight and cultivating a futures mindset is important for future public leadership and governance in order to be future ready. And we definitely see this as critical for shaping the future and for dealing with some of the complex issues that we are dealing with today at the global level.